Welcome back to the MOOC course on research writing. My name is Aradhana Malik and I am helping you with this course. In the previous class, we discussed the presentation of your results. Now, in this section, we are going to talk about interpreting those results in light of the previous literature. So, we are going to talk about discussing your results. Discussion of results. The purpose of this section is to interpret and explain the key findings as a result of the procedure you have followed, the output of the method you have used in light of previous literature, leading to a robust or a solid or a sound justification of key findings, thereby clarifying your contribution to the existing knowledge base. The significance of this section is to highlight the researcher's ability to critically think of the problem at hand. So, this section helps you, or this section helps the writer prove, the research writer prove to the reader that the researcher is able to think critically of the problem that he or she has taken up. And then this section also helps justify the researcher's contribution to the knowledge base. So, in this section what you do is you take your results and explain them in light of the previous literature, thereby helping justify or justifying your contribution to the existing knowledge base. When you send a paper for publication, many times you may think that you have done something good, but many times the reviewers come back and say, okay, but what is your contribution? Whatever you have said is probably already known, and so has already said it, and so has already said it. What is your contribution? So, you come up with your contribution. It is also to highlight the importance of the study. You say, this is what I found out, this is how what I found out is important in light of the existing knowledge base, and this is how it forms the basis of future studies, and that is why it is important. It forms a base for future research. So, you highlight the importance, you also explain how whatever you have studied or whatever you have found out forms the basis for future research. Okay. Some general rules. Avoid verbosity and repetition. You will be tempted to repeat a lot of things. Many times you will see that there are overlaps in the different sections of your paper. For example, the research question appears in chapter 1. In the introduction, you provide an understanding, or you provide an introduction to what you are going to talk about. You write your research questions. In the literature review, you tie everything with your research question. In the methodology section, you tie everything with your research question. In the results section, you take your research questions and tie in the results, or you say, okay, this is how this, as a result of trying to find out an answer to this question, I have found out X or Y or Z. Then in the discussion of results, again the research question will be repeated again and again. But many times we also have a tendency to repeat whatever we may have stated either in the analysis subsection of your method section or in the results section of your document. Many times that does not need to be repeated. So, you need to be very precise, very direct, and you need to avoid repetition. Be concise and clear. Follow a logical stream of thought. In general, interpret and discuss the significance of your findings in the same sequence you described them in your results section. So, coherence is maintained. Consistency is maintained. Use the present verb tense, especially for the established facts. However, refer to specific works or prior studies in the past tense. If needed, use subheadings to help organize your discussion or categorize your interpretations into themes. You would have used subheadings in your literature section, in your literature review section. You again use subheadings to thematize your findings, and you say, this is how this set of findings makes sense together. In the results section, you just report your findings. But what you do in the discussion section is that you pick these different findings, you club them together on the basis of the similarity between them, on the basis of the connections between them. You present them as a whole as part of the same group of findings, and you categorize your interpretations into themes. What you include in this section, again this is from that from the website put up by University of Southern California. You explain your results, you provide references to previous research. So you take the key findings and you explain them in light of what previous research may have said this. For example, you say I have found out X. However, literature, when faced with somebody else, some other researcher, when faced with the same question, found out Y in a different context. My results revealed X as the answer to the same question, and the reason that my results I found out X as a result of asking this question using the same methods is that the context was different, maybe the way the methods were used were different, maybe the sample size was different, etc. So you provide references to previous research. You deduce, you provide a general application of the results, and you form a hypothesis. You say this is how whatever I have found out can aid in further contributions to the knowledge base. Now, you could organize your discussion from general to specific or specific to general. You must be consistent in your usage of key terms that you use throughout your document, narrative style, what kind of style you use, and the verb tense in a specific section. We will come to which tenses to use in which section in a later lecture or in a later part of this course. You restate your research problem and the answers to research questions using the results and justifying those results in the light of lessons learned from the past literature. You describe patterns, principles and relationships shown by each major finding and their placement in the appropriate perspective. You analyze the unexpected findings in light of the previous literature and explain these unexpected findings in light of the lessons learned from the past literature. When you go through your literature, you will find that many times the researchers that write these papers will tell you why they came up with particular findings. If your findings are different, use their reasons for finding out their findings and use those reasons and use their logic and the literature they may have reviewed to justify why your findings went in a different direction. Summarize the principal implications of the findings regardless of the significance. It is summarize the practical implications of the findings regardless of the significance. Overall objectives, you reiterate overall objectives of this section are you reiterate the research problem, you state the major findings, you explain the meaning of the findings and why they are important, you relate the findings to similar studies, consider alternative explanations of the findings and acknowledge the study's limitations and make suggestions for further research on the basis of this section. Different journals, different universities, different colleges prescribe what needs to be included in different sections. I like the limitations and the directions and the section, the subsection on directions called titled directions for future research to be included, or at least the details of these to be included in the conclusion section. But depending on the norms followed in your own institute of higher education, you might want to include this in the discussion section. Some problems to avoid. Again, this is from the website that I was telling you about and a paper by Bavadekar. You avoid restating results except when you are only taking the key findings and explaining them in light of the literature. You avoid introduction of new results. You state whatever you have to state in the results section. Please do not introduce new results in this section. Avoid being verbose. Again, this is being harped upon, but I am telling you, in IIT Kharagpur we have a page limit. You may have done tons of research, but you have only 200 pages to put it all in, and 200 pages includes your front pages, front matter, and your references, and the total sum of whatever it is that you have presented. So you have to present 6, 7, 8 years of work in a maximum of 200 pages. Okay, and the line spacing is also specified. I think it's 1.5 or double spacing. So that is how crisp you have to be. Verbosity needs to be avoided. Avoid overgeneralization. And so you avoid restating your results, you avoid introducing new results, you avoid verbosity, and you avoid overgeneralization. Now that is all we have time for in this lecture. We will continue with some more discussion on research writing in the next class. Thank you very much for listening.